I miss Lauryn Hill.
I know.
The best thing we got to Lauryn Hill since she's been gone has been what's her name out in Britain?
Joss Stone?
No.
No?
Out
of Britain?
Yeah, what's her name? She's like, da 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 da. I never thought I'd find someone like you.
Oh man,
I wish nothing but the best for you.
Adele, what's she doing now?
I'm just saying she doesn't have the same. The album she dropped, was it 21 or something like that? What was the one before the first one?
Yeah, well, she had 19.
19 and 21. Those two were classics.
Killer albums, yeah.
And then
I think she'll be back. I think what happened was those were both breakup albums, and she went and got married. And
people don't know how to sing happy songs.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't know know what to do with happy.
So, but then I think she got divorced. So I expect a good albums.
Did she get divorced? I know she's dating some rapper dude right now, or whatever. So you expect a good album to come out?
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. But, man, I love Meghan Trainor. I'm
Meghan Trainor
fan.
No,
such a good songwriter, and the stuff that doesn't go on the radio. No, man, the stuff that doesn't go on the radio is so good.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up right now. Give me a good Meghan Trainor song. Classic
R&B stuff. That's really good.
Meghan Trainor,
yeah.
I'm looking it up right now. Tell me which one. You gotta give me your best Meghan Trainor R&B joint. If you say All About That Bass, No Trouble, I'm gonna flip out.
Dude. Okay, so here's the deal. I do like that song, but that's not.
She's a culture vulture, bro. I mean,
what are you talking about?
She's a culture vulture. She went back to the 60s and robbed them blind, bro. Like really robbed them.
Dude, she was 15 years old when she got her first deal writing for BMI.
Give me the song.
15 years old.
Give me the song. I just want the song.
Okay.
I know you got her accolades and all. I just want the song.
Okay.
I'm gonna find it.
I mean, she's got the song with John Legend, like I'm Gonna Lose You, but I'm thinking you go by
that ain't nothing but a power play for him. Let me go find this.
Have you heard Lips Are Moving?
Did I Know You Lying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the same thing. I'm All About That Bass, No Trouble. It's the same song.
Dude, this song's so good though.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It has it is. Jason,
have you? I'm trying to find her brand newest one. Has it Made You Look? It's like this really cool early 70s R&B vibe. I think it's called Made You Look.
Jason, we were talking about Lauryn Hill. And then we was talking about the closest thing was Adele, and you bring up Meghan Trainor.
Dude, she's so talented. She's really witty. Her lyrics are really witty.
She's
a great.
By the way, when I use the word,
I won't back down. I won't back down. She's a great writer.
Actually, that would be a better song than anything from her.
She was 15 years old and got brought on as a professional songwriter at BMI.
Jason,
right? She's written some amazing stuff.
Jason,
she's very, very talented.
That's just because of how desperate we are for good R&B music, and she just kind of we wouldn't pay attention to her in the era of Lauryn Hill. That's like saying that. Yeah,
I think that you would have gotten stuff that has less robots playing drums, and then we would have. I mean, everything we make now has got a robot playing drums, and I think that's the reason we don't get the same. We don't get the same feel, and we don't get the same danceability. We don't get the same movement that you used to in the '90s, because all that R&B had real bands behind it. I mean, not all of it, but most of it still did, and we don't anymore. And so nothing's going to have the same feel unless you get a human playing drums.
Her stuff is soulless though. For R&B, it's soulless.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
If it had, you put a better band behind her, and it's not soulless anymore.
Have you ever heard of her?
Everything is soulless, right? That's coming out of the major labels.
Have you heard of her? H.E.R. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I could tell because otherwise you would have never said Meghan Trainor. I'll send you hers mixtape. And if
don't do it. And I'll send you my favorite Meghan Trainor playlist.
I'm still waiting. Okay, here's the deal. I actually listened to everything from Meghan Trainor. I followed her career, and I think that she has been good at, this is what I don't use culture vulture probably the same way that everybody else does. I use culture vulture in the sense that she hasn't really brought anything new to the game. She's riding the wave of old stuff and just kind of like picking some of it off and trying to put it into her. I don't think she has anything to bring to the game that is valuable poetically or musically. I think that she's bringing old stuff back, you know. She's not even pulling a Kanye with this one. Kanye was like, through the wire, to the limit. I mean, come on, man. Like he was taking the old stuff, bringing it back, and then rapping through literally a wired shut mouth. That is not Meghan Trainor for R&B at all.
So you're telling me that it's Kanye or nothing. That's what you're saying.
No.
Anything that's not at Kanye's level.
No, I'm not saying that because Kanye wasn't at Kanye level for a long time. You know what I mean? But what he was, and when people heard Kanye, they were like, "Oh man, he's ripping off old songs. Oh, he's just sampling." But what he was doing was keeping alive something that was old, and we finally caught up to Kanye. There is no catching up to Meghan Trainor, right? There is no. She listens to the old stuff, but she doesn't know how to let that internalize her and then write something that is like, I'm not gonna with Adele. She was all heartbroken and going through breakups, and everybody felt Adele.
It's true.
I never turned on a Meghan Trainor song and been like, "Oh, that's my heart." Like, no,
right,
she doesn't.
She had too good of a relationship with her parents. And never did any drugs, and I
know. Oh, wait. I gotta say, are you saying that because I'm
song to her mom and all that?
Just because, no. That's what liberals do. They take this emotional play. It's like, oh, you wrote a song to your mom, therefore it must be good. That is not a logical flow. No, it's nice that she wrote a song to her mom, but it still probably wasn't good.
That was a good song. No.
And first and second of all, you don't write a song. Well, the last time somebody wrote a song to their mom, it was the final song that you write to your mom. There's only two. There was Dear Mama from Tupac. Right?
I was going to say Tupac.
And Mama, You the Queen of My Heart from Boys and Men. That's it. You don't write no more. After in R&B, don't nobody write any more songs to their mama unless they singing them. That's rules number one for R&B. Hands down.
Yeah.
Jason, I don't even know if I can finish the rest of this interview today. I'm all turned up.
I know.
I just want you to know that's all going live. I want everybody to know. And if anybody
that I love Meghan Trainor.
No, I'm fine with you loving Meghan Trainor. I'm fine with that.
I listen to Neil Diamond too. I know. And
I'm fine with Neil Diamond, but I listen to him. I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. But to bring Meghan Trainor into the conversation with Lauryn Hill and Adele is sacrilege. I just want to say that.
All right.
I mean, you could
we'll see who has the longest career. And
you mean between Adele and Meghan Trainor? No, you are joking. You just now you play it.
Now I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. Because I almost took the bait. I almost
I almost had you though. Yeah.
I had to think about it. I was like, do I want to take the bait on this or not? You know what? But this so this is probably an interesting turn because I think you're. We've talked about this before a little bit, but you said part of the problems with parents is that they don't understand, what was it? Justin Bieber's baby. Yeah. Oh, when I came out, I was all about it. I was fine. I know who wrote the song. Dream wrote the song. He's like, we got to give, we got to give my little dude a 120 BPM song, so he can blow it up. So it was like programmed to hit exactly and do what it did. Like, The Dream is brilliant as far as R&B. He gets R&B. He's probably one of the more brilliant writers and producers out there. Michael B. Cox, another R&B producer out there. I'm with those guys, right? I love what they do. And so when he did that for Justin, I was all about it. But you said that there's like parents are missing out on what's going on in that, and so they kind of they're disconnected from their kids. So my problem with some of the music is that it became a caricature of itself.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's what when I think about Megan, I think about that. But this is a bigger issue because I wasn't going to talk about this because we're supposed to go into this poem. All right, guys, so much trouble. People said I want to hear the poem from Mark
That's
Dottie.
Okay, but because I can go straight to a poem.
Right from
you got
this?
it. Okay.
Okay.
I can go straight to a poem from this because I think the Justin Bieber is a really good example of it's a song about a first crush, right? And what happens
at 11
is I think it's 13 in the song. It says,
I just trying to
when
see.
I was 13.
That's true. All right.
Although that might be the Chameleonaire that says that. But anyway, because doesn't the Chameleonaire have a verse?
No, that was
that song?
No, that
Or
was
who was it?
Not Busta. What's his name? Luda.
Oh yeah, Ludacris. So and so his was when he was 13. So maybe Bieber's was when he was 11. But either way, it's a song about a first crush. And if you've seen that Morgan Freeman reads lyrics, it's hilarious. He reads that song and it like it's deep poetry, and it's not, right? And we know it's not. But what parents don't get is that all of the kids are singing it because they know what is going on, right? They get what's going on. They hear the song and they're like, yeah, totally. I have experienced that first crush. And what Christian parents do is they want to suppress that first crush and say it's not real, rather than say, hey, let me tell you what to do with that first crush. Let me teach you what to do with these feelings of attraction, and let's put them into the context of reality. It was God's idea for boys to find girls attractive and girls to find boys attractive, because there's a window, there's a way to embrace that says, because there is ultimate satisfaction for every single one of our desires in Christ. And he created a world that echoes those ultimate desires with temporary desires and pleasures that are good when used properly. And there's a right way to respond to a first crush. But most parents in my experience, a lot of parents haven't dealt with the shame of their own sexual past, their own sexual sin. Yeah. And so when they want to protect their kids from their first crush, saying there's if that fire can burn down the house, so let's put it out, let's squash it, and instead of saying, hey, do you want to know where that fire goes? Right, it goes into the fireplace, and how you get there is through marriage, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I remember my first crush. Let me tell you about it. And it's a really powerful feeling, and it's a gift from God. And here's the ultimate fulfillment of it is it should draw us towards Christ, who is the ultimate fulfillment of all of these things. And there's a right way to move towards maturity through a crush, a maturity as a Christian, maturity as a person. And there's a way to misuse it, or to think it's the end of the thing in itself,
right?
When really it's a stamp, right, that goes on a letter to send, and instead we just want to lick the stamp and lick the stamp and lick the stamp and never stick it on a letter.
Okay, this is going to seem disconnected, but it's not. Okay, so we've talked about Megan Trainor so far, and the fact that I disagree with you there. We talked about the well, that's not over, by the way. We're gonna have an all-out fight about that at some point. We need to bring another person in so we can have like a court case,
right?
Because I think there's an argument. Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made that you're making, but it's not one that I'm willing to tolerate. That's I think I know what it is. I just don't want to talk. And then we talked about Bieber and missing what's happening there. In both of these conversations, we're talking about art and its impact on people, right? One of the things that we've talked about privately that I'm about to bring out publicly is creating art for Christians, right? Like that's a hard, and not just art, anything. Christians are probably one of the hardest groups to produce content for, and it's and it's because our worldview has things in it that push out certain. All of our worldviews do, but we have maybe more of a particular type of diet for content. Yeah. When we put Christian titles on it, because we all know that's not the end of all when it comes to Christians and their content. Right? Somebody's watching Game of Thrones and it ain't all the pagans, right? Okay. But you said something that I have to challenge or talk to you about. And I wasn't going to watch it until I saw you say it. But you said you don't know why people are mad about She-Hulk. Right? You said, what is it, on Facebook or Twitter or something like that? I think Facebook.
I did. Well, I'd watched the pilot episode, and I've seen all of the stuff, right? Everybody's freaking out, and I hadn't had time to watch it, and sat down. I watched the pilot episode, and I was like, okay, are they gonna turn it on me? Because they haven't yet, right? In the pilot,
right.
They had not. There wasn't anything in there that I thought, okay, they're setting me up or whatever that I could see, right? And maybe I haven't finished it yet, but maybe if I finish the season, then I'll see how they were setting me up for something in the first episode. So it was.
Oh, I got you.
It's a very. Does that make sense? Right. So on Facebook, I said, What are they setting me up for? I don't see it yet.
I got you. So
right? I said, the pilot episode didn't have anything in it.
Well, let me push back on that. Go ahead. I'll push back on that.
So here's the other thing you got to know. I don't really do social media, so I hadn't seen any of their social media campaigns.
Perfect, though. Yeah.
Which some people linked them to me, and I was like, oh, had I seen that?
Oh, right. Okay. So, but wait,
they made some stuff clear in their social media campaigns that was not in the pilot.
That's facts. I agree with you on that. Yep.
So somebody linked me to their Instagram, and I was like, oh,
they're setting me up for something. Yeah.
They're setting me up for something, and they're letting you know, right? They're being in their Instagram. They were, and in their in some of the interviews that they did with the actress.
Yep.
Right. She said, well, hey, here's what we're going to do with this thing. Right. I hadn't seen any of that. You just watch the pilot and say, everybody's freaking out. Where is it? I don't see it yet. What was funny was how people immediately start saying, you're a moron because you haven't seen the third episode yet. Moron.
Right.
Oh, so you're okay with a woman sleeping around and everything. And I was like, I told you I only saw the pilot. That's not in the pilot. What are you talking? So, I mean, and I thought this is the reason that Christians are so hard to serve, right? Is to one of the reasons, right? So to immediately start going after somebody because they can't see what you can see, right? Or haven't seen what you have seen, or there is we don't have the subtlety that so here's a good example. So started watching the remake of the old show with Scott Bakula, Quantum Leap.
Oh,
right. Right.
That's going to be a short-lived season. That's going to be short-lived.
I'm sure it will. I start watching it, and the first episode, you've got the science computer nerd dude. It's like, he's a little feminine. That's interesting. Third episode, he's starting to wear makeup and is fingernails are painted, right? Fifth or sixth episode, he's wearing jewelry, like a pearl necklace. I was like, oh, they sneak their they start with a character who is, but they don't start him out as obviously trans.
Right.
But by the end of the season, he's going to be wearing dresses. Right. So they get what they're doing, that they're working you into comfort with this. So I open up the first episode and I say, trans dude, right? I'm done. But they know this is how long it's going to take for them to get connected to the story and need to know what happens in the end. And that's when we'll start introducing the pearls and dresses on the dude.
So
in She-Hulk, the pilot episode, if you know what's coming, maybe it's visible. When you don't, it's not visible in there.
But Jason, one of the things that I've learned about you, and I've actually embraced this from you, is I've tried to give things but this is really hard. I've tried to give things a fair shake, right? I've tried to give things a fair shake on the face value, and without all the bells and whistles going off, because I'm charismatic. Whatever a typical evangelical has, I got about 16 to 30 more on the backside of that, right?
Right.
And so when the first time I actually wasn't going to watch She-Hulk because I didn't even like the premise. I felt like that they were violating some of their own storytelling rules, and it's not just with She-Hulk. Go ahead. As
a comic book, it's a comedy, right? It's supposed to be like a sitcom. As a comic book, it does not take itself seriously.
No, not at all. Which was which was really disappointing. Honestly, it wasn't just the She-Hulk. It was actually the Hulk. The way that they kind of, they've been really messing up the Hulk for the last 15 years. They just have been struggling to find what is he. They have no metaphysical reality for what the Hulk is.
That happened in the comics too, though. They didn't know what, because there's a certain point. It's similar to Superman. He's a hard character to write stories for because he doesn't have an internal dialogue when he's the Hulk, right? He doesn't have it. So what do you do with a character who is a force of nature, right? He's a great secondary character. He's really hard to make a primary show about.
He's not human. I get that, but there is no humanity to him.
Right. So they have to find his humanity. They have to develop his character into a human, and that's what makes Hulk movies so bad most of the time. Because they're just trying to, you've got to find that, and it could be a really interesting character, but it's a hard character. Superman, same way. Superman's really hard to write for.
Why is Superman hard to write for?
Because he doesn't have weaknesses, right? So
kryptonite,
right, but that it's not. He doesn't have moral weaknesses. Put it that way. He doesn't have, and that's always the struggle, right? So
unless you're Zack Snyder, then he's got to.
Yep. The good. That's the problem. Is that's what they always end up doing. How do we give him a moral struggle? You had the same thing with Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings movies. You've got a character that doesn't have moral struggles. What do you do with him? You can't leave him out like Tom Bombadil, right? He's got to be in there. Well, what they do is they give him moral struggles that he doesn't have in the book, because we don't know how to write those characters. So, what they did well with the Superman movies that worked, what they do is they make a world that has to conform to him. It's the same thing with the first Iron Man movie. The reason it worked is you have a character that doesn't have a moral flaw in a world that does, and the world comes into line with him. So instead of it being a character about his heroic journey, it's a character about the world discovering it a new sense of morality because of his sacrifice.
Talking about Iron Man?
Iron Man, Excuse me. Not Iron Man. Captain America.
Okay,
Captain America.
I was gonna say Iron Man had a couple moral problems.
Right. First Captain America, Superman, the old Superman movie, the first Superman movie, fantastic. But that's what it is he sacrifices himself, and the world comes into line morally. Right. The world is changed. So those are harder to write right now because of the cynicism. So it's easier to write something like The Boys, where people get power and they're good guys until they're not, and then they become the bad guys, right? That because we're more comfortable in a world without heroes than but we actually, I think that's why we need to be writing stories with heroes. We need to restore our sense of heroism and the goodness of heroism.
Well, then, but it would seem though that they would have a massive problem with the scriptures then, with Christ when he comes on the scene, because there's no moral failure. There's nothing in his armor to stop him. He's just, but the part of it is that he operates both with the hypostatic union, depending on what's happening, right? And so they don't know how to manage that in their writing, but they have a perfect model in Christ.
Right. And that's where, as Christians, we ought to have an advantage. But we don't read the Bible like it's a story, right? We read the Bible like it's a theological workbook. And so we don't let our storytelling be formed by the scriptures. Because it's literature. It's perfect literature. It's inerrant literature. But it's literature. It functions as literature. And we should let our literature be formed by it. But we're not well formed by the scriptures. Okay. Because I don't think we come to it in a submissive way, right? We come to it looking for building blocks instead of submitting ourselves to it as it is.
So then when our stories, we probably, and this is what happens when the gospel is starting to leave a culture, we can't think of other stories with a hero that doesn't have errors in his armor, right? Like we can't, that kind of person just wouldn't be.
We don't know how to tell that story. Yep. And people want it. I mean, Captain America is incredibly popular. People want that story, but they have a hard time believing it. And it's hard to find writers that want to write that story.
So then, like, they even have a problem with stories like Job then, because for them, they would all write the story like Job's friends were right, right? Like, Job did something wrong. He did something wrong. They can't write the bigger story, the bigger narrative that's there. You know, it was really interesting. You talking about the Hulk. I've always had the problem, like, why am I having a problem with the Hulk? And I think you just nailed it for me. It's because his character doesn't represent a hero as we understand heroes in the Western culture, Western environment, because of the Christian gospel, right? Our heroes aren't the kind that actually, I mean, I guess you can think about it in time of Judges. He probably fit inside some of that categories, but that doesn't point to the ultimate hero. But he's not human when he transforms to be the kind of person that needs to deal with wickedness. He's not human in that point. Yep. So how do you write? So then he's not trying to be a hero in any way. He's just lashing out.
Right. How do you write a story with a hurricane as the central character?
Yeah. Right.
Right. You can't. And that's always the difficulty with Hulk. Now, having a hurricane on your side that shows up when you need to fight sometimes, he's a great character in an Avengers movie as a side character.
No, you're right. That's why he had to be mixed with Bruce, because otherwise you don't get the human side of that's really good. So, but the thing go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
The thing that bothered me immediately about She-Hulk was that because of I took everything that was going on in the culture, everything that I know is going on with Disney, everything that I know that they're trying to push on us, and I came to it with those lenses, and I'm just like, and I just started identifying, marking up, okay, this is that, this is trans, this is homosexuality, and I didn't really, so when I watched it, I only watched it because of your comments. And so I said, well, let me see what's going on. And so I didn't watch it because I already done my checklist just from the trailer. When she picked the dude up from the couch and then carried him off into the room from the trailer. Oh, you didn't see that?
I didn't even see the trailer.
Yeah,
right?
I saw the trailer. I was like, oh yeah, I know what's going on here. That is not cool. That is
so here's my question though: is can Christians learn to be as subtle of a storyteller as they are?
Well, She-Hulk wasn't a subtle storytelling to me. So when I saw the trailer, I knew kind of where they were going to go. When I saw the pilot, I had different thoughts because I watched the pilot as if I was going to watch it with you, right? And I was like, so I'm going to be a little more open. I'm going to let them tell their story. And the pilot did something to me that was very low budget and cheap.
What's that?
It's kind of like when you go into the first episode was just locked inside of one place, and it was like so you can test and see how much power she has, and it was like, come on, man, like, y'all, this is all you guys are gonna write. I want to leave. Oh, you can't leave. You're gonna be a hero. And it just didn't feel like that they built it. I thought it was interesting how she got infected, a little forced,
totally forced.
And so I didn't feel like it was good storytelling. I didn't even care about the other stuff at that point. I just didn't feel like it was good storytelling.
My suspicion, as I watched it, I thought they're going to turn this on me, right? They barely even tell a story. It's Act 1. The pilot is Act 1, and that's something that I don't like about the new way that television is written, where they don't write it as if each episode needs to be its own story. I think it's generally lazy, right? You have to watch an entire season to get the story. I don't like that. I like every episode to be
self-contained. That's connected.
Self-contained story. And episode 1 wasn't. You can tell but
that's because you're biblical, Jason. You're a Christian, so you got all these 66 books that tell one story, you know?
Right, exactly. But what they do in that episode, it's all about connecting you to the characters, or it's all about the charm of each actor that they bring in. And they don't introduce non-charming characters in episode 1. So
yeah,
whatever it is,
that's why I felt
that's what I'm saying. What is that? Is that the right way to tell stories? Do you just show all your cards front? Is it okay to say, okay, here's where I want people to end up. Here's where I know people are. I'm going to tell a story that starts where they're at purposefully to move them. Is that okay? Or is that propaganda? Right? Is that something that we as Christian storytellers should be doing or not doing? I don't think most Christian storytellers have the skill to do it.
I agree.
Whether or not it's the right thing to do, that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I can't find anybody having the conversation. Tried to spark it with She-Hulk, but then my wife got sick, and so I disappeared off social media, and I never even finished I haven't even watched anything. I watched a little bit of the new show on Wrexham, the Wrexham soccer show. But other than that, I've barely watched anything.
I finished the whole season against my family's wishes. My family was like, "What are you doing watching this? Dad, shame on you." Oh, I love the fact that my family had a natural rejection to this. And I was like, I'm watching it. I'm gonna let them, and then I'm gonna make my decision, you know. And this was
after having, I think that's the only thing to do. If you're not going to watch it, I say you haven't earned the right to criticize it if you haven't watched it.
Well, I don't.
You can explain why you're not going to watch it.
There is.
You can say, "Here's what I know about it. I'm not going to watch it for these reasons."
Yeah,
but you don't get. You don't get to
solid critique of it. That's a valid critique of it. Yeah. I think
there's all sorts of things that I haven't watched that I know I'm not going to watch, and if somebody says, "Oh man, if you watch that," I'll say, "No, I know too much about it. I'm not going to watch it." So, and they'll say, "Man, it's amazing," or "Oh, it's terrible." You're like, "Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I can't make that. I can't make the criticisms of somebody that's watched it. I can make an argument for why I'm not going to watch it."
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so then we need to go watch a movie together, and there's 2 out that I really want us to see. I want us to see Black Adam and Black Panther 2. I think we should go watch those.
All right.
And maybe Woman King when it comes out. I want us to watch those because I think those are interesting. So Woman King, real quick, and then we'll jump into this poetry because it's kind of the same thing, honestly.
It is. It's the same. It's the same question, and I think what's so hard is there is a skill level in storytelling being leveraged against us, and we don't have a response in kind.
No, right? And that's a good point. Like, Lore just dropped Laura Clausen's procedure video, and we had Marcus Pittman and Laura on the show yesterday, and I watched that video, and it changed the complete texture in the room. It was different after watching that, and it was no question that it affected you. And it started making me think. It was like, what would it have been like to get a Jet magazine back in the 60s, was it early 60s or late 50s, and Emmett Till's face and casket is all over the front of it, and I had to I had to deal with it. It's in my face. I have to deal with it. That would have changed my whole day. Would have changed because that's real life, And watching this, even though it's cartoon, and I asked Marcus, I said, Marcus, why is this having a different impact on me than just images? Because I've seen the pictures before. I've seen the real pictures. I've seen the real videos of the human body. I've seen all that stuff. But this is different. Why is it different? And Marcus said that's the difference between storytelling and art versus just pictures. You have music behind it. You have a narrative behind it. There's actors. All this is moving you in one particular direction. Now, a picture is definitely art, but it's singular. It's not doing all that. There's no music you hear at the time. There's no story behind it. This child in the procedure, there's a story of the technician who is experiencing this person dying, and he's telling you from his perspective, watching this girl die. And so the score that's there, it's art that does exactly what it's supposed to do. And
right.
And it's the first time I thought about, that's why we don't do so well. It's because we don't take all those things. People will clown and talk about the charismatic folks, but one of the things that charismatic people do understand is that music, and without driving emotionalism to its extreme, but you should have emotion. That's what Edwards was good for me on. There should be a godly emotion to the realities that you are sent to that causes something to stir up in you. That isn't wrong. It's wrong when you're manipulated to do that and to do it for the wrong ends, right? And so we've lost all that as Christians to say, we don't want to play on people's emotions, or we don't. No, I want you to have the right emotions to seeing someone die who shouldn't be killed, right? I want you to say no and to weep about that, right?
Because we're not rationalists.
Right.
We don't, right. The rationalism was that was the road out of Christianity. That is not Christianity. And slavery was ended by the Methodists in England because Hannah More started putting on plays in all of the areas where no one else would put on a play. So she went into all the poor areas. She went anywhere she could where there was a theater that other people weren't using, and she started producing plays telling the realities of slavery, right? And so by the time the vote comes around, the English population wants slavery ended.
Moral imagination.
The moral imagination had been reformed by the novels and the plays and the poetry of Hannah More. And I think, and most people don't even know her name, right? And she was incredibly influential because we think that that slavery was ended by a vote, right? The vote was the response to the people no longer wanting slavery, because when they were arguing on the floor that England needed to end slavery, the argument was, quit bringing your religion into this room. This is an economic question, not a religious question. And all of you abolitionists are trying to bring religion into politics, and we don't do that here. This is about the economics. The economics of England.
Wow.
By the time that the vote actually went, though, it was because all these people know, if I don't vote to abolish slavery on English soil, I will be removed by the population from my spot, my role. And so everyone had to let their morality change if they wanted to keep their position in the government. So, but how we tell the story is that the vote changed, ended slavery, because we are actually modernists who think that we could vote to change the culture.
So, Jason, do you think that what we see with the overturning of Roe v. Wade is just that? Is it just a vote, or has something happened in our moral imagination that's adjusted? Like, what do you?
I think that the years, the generations now of work that pro-life Christians have been doing has seeped out, and the stories have now been told, and enough people have been affected by abortion personally that they want it to go away. And the overturning of Roe versus Wade, I think the other thing that it does is, in God's economy, is it reveals that there are places that have repented and places that have not in the country, right? That our country is not a homogenous place, but that there are states now where abortion is no longer, or is being limited, is going down, is disappearing, because of the work of repentance, because of the repentance of people. So
it's not as easy as yes and no. It's like some here, none there. Fire going out over here, fire blazing over there. So we have this split.
Kanye, when you have Kanye going on, and he and saying the largest killer of blacks in America is abortion. On where was that interview? He was interviewed by Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Right.
He's been saying it everywhere though, but yeah.
Yeah, he's been saying it everywhere, but that, I think, was the largest platform that he's had, and he was really clear. And just to see Tucker Carlson, say, I want everybody to know I agree with you, right? This is a problem. But he was, I think even he was surprised at the straightforwardness of Kanye in that moment. Yeah. And it's Kanye, so he's going to be straightforward, but I think we're in this weird cultural moment where you've got generations of labor from fruit that doesn't look like it should be able to happen, like the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I don't think there was anybody that saw it coming.
All right, let's go through this poem. We've been trying to go through this poem for 6 weeks now. I think something like that. And somebody
something like that. Yeah.
Somebody sent me a message on Facebook. It was like, excuse me, could you let Jason go through the poem, please? I mean, you cool and all, Knox, but can we please get through the poem? We've been trying to get through this poem. Okay, so I don't know if I should. Yeah, we've been trying to get through this poem for a while because why? Why were we trying to go through this poem again?
You asked for a poem that could show us why poetry is important.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We for the most part, our problem has been literature, poetry. That's part of what's got us so Gnostic, so stuck in this. We can't see very well. Why we don't tell stories well. We don't understand poetry. We can't read poetry. And so instead of talking about all the problems, you were like, we just need to be doing it. Let's just do poetry. And then as we hit the problems, we'll work through them. But let's do poetry. So let's I'm gonna try and do the poetry this time. There's just so many other things I want to hit, but every time it always comes back to, you know, do we know how to be poetic? Do we know how to read poetically? Do we know how to think poetically? And do we know how to speak poetically? Okay, and so this is us trying to do that.
Yep, because the poets always lead the culture.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It's always. And so the storytellers, the poets, they're the ones that are out in front leading the culture for good or for ill. So this one is called Messiah Christmas Portions.
Oh,
and it's
just in time.
Exactly. It's by the poet Mark Dottie. I'll just read it and then we'll talk about it some. A little heat caught in gleaming rags, in shrouds of veil torn and sun. I'm going to start over. I wasn't ready. A little heat caught in gleaming rags, in shrouds of veil torn and sunshot swaddlings over the Methodist roof. Two clouds propose a Zion of their own, blazing colors of tarnish on copper. Against the steely close of a coastal afternoon, December, while under the steeple, the choral society prepares to perform Messiah, pouring in their best blacks and whites onto the raked stage. Not steep, really, but from here, the first pew, they're a looming cloud bank of familiar angels, that neighbor who fights operatically with her girlfriend, for one, and the friendly bearded clerk from the post office, tenor trapped in the body of a baritone, altos from the A&P, soprano from the t-shirt shop. Today, they're all poise, costume and purpose, conveying the right note of distance and formality. Silence in the hall, anticipatory, as if we're all about to open a gift we're not sure we'll like. How could they compete with sunset's burnished oratorio? Thoughts which vanish when the violins begin. Who'd have thought they'd be so good? Every valley, proclaims the solo tenor, a sleek blonde I've seen somewhere before. The liquor store? Shall be exalted. And in his handsome mouth the word is lifted and opened into more syllables than we could count. Central dilated in a baroque melisma, liquefied. The pour of voice seems to make the unplaned landscape the text predicts the Lord will heighten and tame. This music demonstrates what it claims. Glory shall be revealed. If art's acceptable evidence, mustn't what lies behind the world be at least as beautiful as the human voice? The tenors lack confidence, and the soloists, half of them anyway, don't have the strength to found the mighty kingdoms these passages propose. But the chorus, altogether, equals burning clouds and seems itself to burn commingled powers deeded to a larger centering claim. These aren't anyone we know. Choiring dissolves. Familiarity in an uppouring rush which will not rest, will not for a moment be still. Aren't we enlarged by the scale of what we're able to desire? Everything, the choir insists, might flame inside these wrappings, burns another brighter life, quickened now by song. Hear how it cascades in over lapidary waves of praise. Still time to change.
Boy, there's a lot there.
There is a lot there. It's very dense. It's very packed.
Why did you pick this one for us? Because
I picked this one.
Go ahead. Well,
the
sorry. The reason I'm asking is because I was asking you to pick something that would help us. You know, the whole reason I started reading Dante, the whole reason I started getting into poetry now is because I'm trying to have vision. I'm trying to see the plays and see everything that's going on in the culture, and then see how to apply the gospel to it. And so I asked you to grab something that would help us develop those type of skills. So how does something like this develop those skills?
Well, there's a couple reasons. Because one, the content of it explains exactly why the skills are important. So this is written by a non-Christian who, so he was invited by a neighbor to come see them sing the Messiah at the church. And so it's the story of him going with low expectations, and he almost stops and doesn't go in because the sunset's really beautiful outside the church. And he says, I'm going to have to sacrifice finishing watching this beautiful sunset to go in and listen to a choir because I know somebody. And so he goes in thinking he's going in to be polite, but that he's missing out on a beautiful sunset. And then he starts looking around and he starts recognizing the people in the choir and thinking, these are just some people that I know from the neighborhood. The know from the liquor store, that I know from the gas station, but then they start singing, and he records the effect that the music has on him. And there's a couple of things that the music does to him. One, it makes him think. He says it makes him realize, or he see that if this might be true. Right? He says, this is so beautiful that it makes me hope that the words are true. Right. And I mean, and it makes him even question his own worldview, because he says, maybe there is something behind the world. Maybe there is something that I am supposed to see through the sunset.
Yeah.
Maybe there was something I'm supposed to see through. And he says, and if there's something behind the world, it has to be at least more beautiful than the human voice, which at that moment is wrecking him, that how gorgeous it is.
I love how he says this. He says, the music demonstrates what it claims. Glory shall be revealed. If art's acceptable evidence, mustn't what lies behind the world be at least as beautiful as a human voice? It's really well said.
It is, right? And so what's so interesting about it is you've got this this man that is not he is not well disposed to the gospel, to the scriptures. He doesn't like it. He's actually a homosexual. Right? He's a famous homosexual poet out of San Francisco. But he can't, when he listens to the Messiah being sung, he can no longer sit there and just flat out deny the good news of the gospel, because it's being presented so beautifully. So it makes him stop and say, wait, what are they saying? What's the claim here? Because this is true. And it makes him stop and almost hope that it's true, because the art gives a glimpse of the beauty of the gospel and a beauty of the lordship of Christ, because that's what he's singing about. And he says the voice isn't quite strong enough to establish what it claims. Right? Every mountain shall be exalted, every valley, every valley shall be exalted, every mountain shall be brought low. He says, but it demonstrates it. Right? It's a win that the art becomes a window through which the truth of the good news is visible to him. Now, he doesn't convert on the spot or anything, but he says, I can't just mock this. Right? Listening to the Messiah, he says, I can't just mock the lordship of Christ, because this makes it beautiful. This displays how beautiful it is. And and this is one of the things that poetry does, a good poem does well, where you read it, when you get to the end, the next time you read it, the beginning has a new meaning. Right? So when you go back to the beginning, after you see that the choir's of the Messiah has torn back a veil, when you go back and read the beginning, it says, a little heat caught in gleaming rags, in shrouds of veil, torn and sunshot swaddlings. Over the Methodist roof, two clouds propose a Zion of their own. blazing colors of tarnish on copper against the steely close of a coastal afternoon under the steeple. The music has built a steeple and that he heard that revealed what he didn't see in the sunset before he came in, right? So the music tore back the veil and showed him heaven, showed him Christ seating on the throne. And when you go back and you see, you read the beginning, you see that it has caused him to realize that that he didn't see through the veil of the sunset over the roof on the way in, right? So it's a beautifully constructed poem. He's a very gifted poet, but he is talking about the reason that Christians need to be working in the arts and not realizing it. I don't think he's realizing it. I think he's, but I think it's this honest assessment that he's making of the effect that hearing the song is having on him. And as Christians, we come from a long tradition and line of artists, of great artists, but they had a view of the world that each art still made sense. We have a tendency, because of our cosmology, we think art is manipulative. And so rather than art actually being revealing, right? The art that the words of Isaiah sung can somehow be truer than the words of Isaiah on the page. Not truer because they're false on the page, but because in the context being the beauty of the truth comes through, and that the truth, if you try or if you don't add beauty to the truth, then you're not actually getting the whole truth, because the beauty is part of the truth.
Oh, this is as I was thinking about as you were talking, I was thinking like, man, he's writing this about the Messiah. Like whenever you go, that's my favorite time of year, is because I know I'm going to hear Handel everywhere, and it's no question it's beautiful when you hear it,
Right.
But how, are we there isn't anything modern that lives close to anything like that. There's nothing modern that lives close to anything like that. So you don't get modern things that have the kind of beauty that reveals the majesty of Christ, because you don't what is it? Education? We don't do poetry anymore. What is it? Why don't we have? This homosexual is not going to walk inside of a modern church and be like, "Ooh, yeah, these guys pull back the veil," right?
Right. And I think so. We don't have the cosmological assumptions in which even writing something like the Messiah makes sense, because we don't believe in the fundamental unity of truth, beauty, and goodness. We don't believe in the fundamental unity of the cosmos, the interconnectedness, right? We don't look at at creation and think it's a symphony, it's a cathedral. We should imitate and write a symphony, build a cathedral. We don't have a cosmology in which it even makes sense to build a cathedral, to write a symphony, right? So now Jesus, as the architect, is as compelling as he ever has been. So people still get saved because we're saved by being introduced to Jesus. The cultural outworking of that, it takes generations, but it also takes studied generations, right? It takes generations that actually dig in and are transformed by the scriptures. And we have been being deformed by the storytelling of Enlightenment modernism, and not formed by the storytelling that that actually believes the world is a symphony, the history is a symphony, that the creation is a cathedral, that it all is interconnected, that you've got repeating patterns, that you have the wisdom that it takes to see the world as art. We don't have it. And so when we go to act, we're always imitating who we think God is. When we tell a story, we're always imitating the kind of storyteller we think God is. And so we get the kind of stories that our faith produces because our faith is thin and squeaky.
You said that poetry, good poetry, it re-establishes the beginning when you go back. What are some other rules about poetry? So, you get to the end, you go back to the beginning, and you get to see. That was really cool. Do you think, did he do that on purpose, or was that?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the difference between a master, and, somebody that just dabbles. And I think everybody should be dabbling and writing terrible poetry. I think it's a good thing to write terrible poetry. But a master is someone that there isn't a word out of place, that every word is the right word. And so he's definitely doing it on purpose. So, and there are some, really solid living poets right now. But so some of the rules, not so much the rules of poetry, but one of the things that makes poetry great is that you have a, that the meaning is double, right? So you're always talking about more than one thing at a time. And then that the sibilants, the sounds, are in support of the image or in support of the point of the. So there's a musicality to good poetry, and the musicality of it is also a part of the meaning or a part of the atmosphere that's created.
The rhythm
by the
that's
poem.
there.
The rhythm. So the rhythm, the particular sounds that are chosen, the repetition of sounds. And this is where you've got some of the great writers of poetry and hip hop. They really get that sort of, that the sounds of it all are really central to the way the poetry is going to affect a person. So, does that all make sense?
Yeah. It's kind of depressing, man. Sorry. I mean, this was supposed to be uplifting, but it's kind of depressing because I just feel like there's there's a couple things that I'm thinking about for myself. It's, you got to learn how to do poetry. You got to learn. Reading Dante has been interesting because I'm picking up his rhythm and his beats. I'm hearing his timing, seeing what he's flipping it out, and he's going somewhere else with it. And I feel like I need to read him over and over again because there's something else there. And so we were talking, and so my thought has been, well, what happens when someone decides to make good poetry and if we're not trained to read it, then it doesn't have an effect on us. But good poetry is supposed to have beauty so that it does have an effect on you, regardless if you're trained in it or not. Right. So this guy doesn't have to be trained in poetry to have the effect happen to him. He's just able to describe what's happening to him. Right. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I was trying to think of something that Christians made recently. It's beautiful, that would have that effect. But that still does that. Right. So if we're proclaiming the gospel, if we're proclaiming Christ, there's a beauty to that works regardless if we do it well or not. So there's that, right?
Right. Well, I mean, that's something like Johnny Cash's America 4 album where he covered that 9 Inch Nails song.
Yeah.
That would be, I think, a good example where, man, the first time I heard that, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't I couldn't. It's like you can't look away. I had to stop what I was doing and just listen to him sing, and it was so moving. But it was hugely successful. People loved that song, and everybody knew that he's singing about Jesus. There's nobody that walks away thinking that that song is not about Jesus. But nobody cared, right? People still loved the song because it's so beautiful. But he has spent his life working on the craft of being able to communicate emotion with a simple melody, right? And he does that so well. That's what Johnny Cash does really well. But old Johnny Cash, recording in his living room was more powerful than young Johnny Cash. Because he'd spent all that time on the craft. And so I think that'd be a good example because, he's saying when the man comes around, and he's literally just singing out of the book of Revelation and people are loving it. That was his most successful album.
Yeah.
So there are Christian artists doing that. Andrew Peterson's his Christmas concerts are, or he puts on a Christmas concert with a bunch of musicians in Nashville every year. So there are Christians that are trying to do it, but it's not something we're known for. And in the film industry, it's something we're known for not doing. Outside of the Passion of the Christ, I can't think of any recently made great Christian film that was thought of as great art, if that makes sense.
Well,
you have non-Christian directors pointing at the Passion and saying this movie is one of the greatest examples of a well-made movie that you'll ever find.
All right, what's the next poem we need to work through?
Next poem. Do you want to just read you another one, or?
I kind of want to read it first. I don't know.
Do another one.
Let's go for it.
We do another one next week.
No, let's go for it. Let's do two because let's go for two.
It's been a little bit.
Let's do this. Let's talk about your book. You got a book of poetry, and
I do.
We never talk about your books. We say nothing about them, and you have In Pursuit of Kindness, brother. That book, I think everybody needs to read because first of all, it's beautiful. And it's Christian humanism. It's everything we've been talking about. And it's one of the things that I hadn't thought about very much. I mean, no one, In Pursuit of Kindness, it made me check whether or not I was being kind like Jesus to people, right? That was really challenging. And it wasn't like it was in your face. It was just like, it's amazing how far kindness goes and what kindness is and how to operate like that in your daily life. And I think what we operate is default apologetics, right? Like, it's like, okay,
right.
How do I, but when you're actually pursuing kindness, the way that you talk to people with your apologetics is adjusted. And what you actually use apologetics for, your apologetics becomes more for you than it does for them. And your kindness becomes something that you bait them with, it's different. Versus like you're ready to argue. No, I'm ready to be kind to a person. This is what kindness looks like when you talk to someone, when you engage with someone, instead of kind of being robotic and you're apologetic, you're being human. And so anyway, Pursuit of Kindness is the one that I have my daughter reading it right now. I think everybody needs to go get Pursuit of Kindness from Jason Farley. What other, you got a book of poetry? Oh, No One Doubts a Belly Laugh.
Yeah, no one doubts a belly laugh. That was my first book of poetry. And that one, a mixture of comic poetry and what's called devotional poetry or religious poetry. And then my newest one. So then I have 20, my second one is, man, I can't remember what it's called, but it, is poems about time, about the passage of time. So that one I published right as I turned 40, or right before I turned 40. And so it's just reflections on time. And I've gotten really good feedback from folks on both of those. My newest one is called The Anchor Holds, and it's so every Sunday I write a reflective poem about the sermon to try and think through how the sermon applies to my life. And,
Really?
yeah. And so most of the poems in my newest one are reflections on the Christian life in that sense. So,
Interesting.
what kind of reflections on sanctification, and growth and maturity, but it's organized around the parts of a ship. So Saint Boniface says that the church is like a great ship sailing the seas of the world, and so I organized the poems around the different parts of a ship, and how each part reflects a different aspect of our life. The anchor, the sail, and then it's got a long poem in there called The Shipwreck, about the realities of the Christian life as well. So and it technically releases tomorrow, although it's available on Amazon right now.
I was looking at it on Amazon, actually.
Yeah. And so it's available on The Anchor Holds. Yeah. Poems from the Shipwreck is what I'm excited about for this one is it's the most personal. My poetry has tended to be more didactic, but this is a lot more personal reflection, but not personal reflection in the sense of like, let me tell you about my life, but it's personal reflection on the scriptures. So a lot of the poems they have the scripture in the title. Here is the scripture verse that I'm trying to apply to the sanctification of myself and my family. So hopefully it's well received, but it's available on Kindle and in paperback. And if you got Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. So
yeah, I saw that. That is, I think the one that started me reading some of your works was you brought me No One Doubts a Belly Laugh, and it made me think differently about the kind of creatures we are, because I'm usually spending my time arguing with somebody about a fact or something, and it's like, but okay, what is the tangible reality of this thing, and how do I communicate that? Because that, in and of itself, is its own argument. Like, someone laughing is, you won. Like, you don't beat that. And so when I started reading No One Doubts a Belly Laugh, I was like, oh, I've been going about this all wrong. Right?
Right. Because if we think that we and other people are just a collection of ideas working their way out in the world, we're going to approach our life and other people in a particular way that is not helpful, because it's not reality, right? We're fighting against reality if we think that we have that people are an extension of a mind, an extension of a logical set of thoughts, right? C.S. Lewis says that most of the time we make a decision and then we fill in the reasons afterwards, but the decision just comes from the way that from our gut. And so he says that's why it's so important that our moral imagination is formed by the right stories, because our gut response actually guides us around, right? Now, our gut response can be reformed or formed properly, is sanctified, but because our gut response is sanctified or is made up of the story that we are currently telling about our life, we have to reform our gut response through stories, right? And by learning new and better and stories. And so uh, w- uh, when you realize that a person's life is a story, a person's decision making process is more like a choice about what stanza of the poem we think we're in than it is a logical set of thought through processes. The less likely you are to think of apologetics and to think of serving your neighbor as a logical exercise, and more an exercise in storytelling and
And
just being the right character in somebody's life. Like, what character am I in this person's life? Am I stepping towards them, serving them, loving them?
yeah, it gives you kind of a perspective from outside of it and looking at the whole thing. Again, holding it up, but it makes people far more complex than ones and zeros too, right? You start thinking
Yeah,
of people in more human when you start thinking about people as a form of poetry themselves, right? Um, then you start thinking about this is not just one thing. This is multiple things that are being held together that leads to someone doing and acting and functioning this way. It's not just one thing, which
yeah,
makes a person far more complex, and it makes you think about arguments far more robust too. You know, when we talk about the pro-life issue and we talk about anything in politics, economics, we don't just think of about one issue or one thing. We think about multiple things that lead to this particular outcome that we need to deal
right,
with, you know, and it makes you think more robust about how you need to function in different spheres. You know, you need the civil magistrate to function its sphere, but we also need to make sure that we're working and thinking about the duties and responsibilities of homes to make a certain type of person and to build a certain type of person so that we have an easier outcome on our civil magistrate. It just makes you think more robust about the whole
right.
system, not just making it so simple. All right. I don't know if I want to go. I want to do. You make me want to go read some Dante right now. But okay.
Well, yeah, I think too. It helps you it helps you properly place yourself in the story, because Christians, a lot of Christians right now act like they're victims of the system. Um, and so when they tell the story, you've got the big bad guy over there, the secular humanist, the leftist,
Mm,
whatever. They're up there, and um, they're the oppressor, and I'm the victim, and I'm barely surviving. Um, and it takes us out of all of the opportunities that we have all of the time to love our kids, to raise our kids, and to look at them and say, "Man, look out, world! I'm raising kids. Right, there, we are gonna leave a divot here, right? It this When you have that victim mentality, you don't you end up thinking, I don't have to make a difference, or I'm not going to make a difference, because there's somebody too strong that has me under their thumb,
mm.
rather than, man, I'm surrounded. I've got them right where I want them because I've got these kids. Look out. Or I, I I'm a plumber. That means I'm in people's houses day in, day out. Look out, devil. Here I come. I'm not only making sure the water flows, but every time I go into a house, pray for the family. Um,
Mm.
get to be known as the guy that does his work well, does his work cheerfully, right? That you are much more dangerous to the world than the world is to you. And that's the story that we're told about us, but often we don't have the faith to tell the same story about ourselves that God is telling about us. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, and I think that's one of one of the central things about, you say, well, why would we study poetry? It's like, well, because you're being sent out into the world to write the next stanza of God's poem, right? That's so you're reading poetry because you're one dangerous guy, right? You're gonna be good at that. You want to get good at that, right?
I was talking to Jason Whitlock, and he said, he was telling me, he was like, Dave, I don't think people know how important, the written word. He was talking about his articles. Jason is a great writer. And he's like, if there was something more important than the written word, God would have released the Bible out on DVD. Right? Like, he's like, but there's nothing more important than the written word. He's like, he's like, that is where the power is. That is where, and as he was saying this, I was thinking, I'm like, man, since we've been talking, I've been reading the dictionary, reading more than I probably have ever had before, trying to put new words in my vocabulary, because I think, would you say, if you don't know how to use words, how did you say that you won't have the power that you need to transform the world, because the world was made by words?
I think our vocabulary is the limit of our dominion. In a world made of words. Yeah.
And so, but if you gather words, you got to figure out a way to organize them in a way that's moving.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the things that, we got to go. But if you think about the things that move us right now, it is more the structure of what's said rather than what's said. Right. And if you can ever merge those two things together, my dream of a person would be somebody who is as well read and written like Doug Wilson, you know what I mean, mixed with the T.D. Jakes. Man, if I can get those two things merged together in the polemic and in the literature, like those two things that's your best battle rapper you could ever have. Right?
Right.
Because, Jakes, man, he gonna move you. I don't care if you like him, you don't have to like him. Don't really matter.
But the art of preaching,
he's masterful.
The art of it down,
and he's not the only one. That art is something that's really been developed and matured in Southern and in Black churches, right? Those two, you got Southern Baptists who still have that art and very capable of doing it. Some are more polished than others, but particularly in the Black church, like, we've learned the art of that kind of polemic, that type of preaching, and it'll be really, really, really talented and skill set, and then nothing in it of substance, right? Like zero substance. And I always was like, man, if I can take those two worlds and mix them together, to me, that would be, it's kind of what John Knox was. Like that. That's this.
Right.
He had, people don't even know how intelligent he was, but he was also a great orator too.
Well, and that's what, Thomas Aquinas in his day was famous as a preacher. He wasn't, so he would travel around, and everywhere he would preach, everyone met in tears, and be moved and converted. And he was a very gifted preacher. And then he also was like the great mind of his time. So we tend to set those things apart, and think that if somebody is moved, it's because in spite of the preaching, they were moved.
Right.
Rather than the preaching being an art form that God said, this is the art form through which I want to recreate the world. The preaching of the word, the world made of words will be rebuilt with words. But when the world was being created, and God said, and Jesus said, let there be light, or God said, let there be light. And those words are Jesus. The light is Christ, and he's bringing the light into the world. And do we imagine they were boring? If you heard them, would you be moved? Of course you would. Right. So it's not, it's the right thing to do to work on the craft of preaching. If you're a preacher, to move people with your sermons, because it's the art form the Holy Spirit has chosen to use to recreate the world. And so we want to be as good as we can at our craft, or preachers ought to want to be as good as they can at their craft so that they can bless people, serve people. And I think because we don't have a cosmos in which beauty and truth hold together, we feel guilty trying to get good at preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Pastors feel like they're that they are being, they're because it can be used for manipulation.
Yeah, that's right.
We think we ought not to touch it, rather than, well, what's the right use of this?
Yeah, I mean, I always think about it's not that you can't carry the ark. It's, are you doing it the way in which God told you to do it?
Right.
Like, yeah, you can carry it, you can move it, but there's a way to do it. Yeah. He's giving you instructions on how to move the ark. Now you try and reach out, and and touch it the wrong way. You gonna get burnt. You should die, right? But if you're doing it the way He's told you to do it, there's a way to do it, and He's giving you tools and wisdom on how to do that.
Yeah, and there's, but most Presbyterians just lecture instead of preach.
That's right.
Different art. There's different art forms, but
we need to get. I think that's why people really like Paul Washer. Like it's part of it is the art form of what he's doing. Right. It's when I was charismatic, there's only two people that really resonated with me that came into my world, which was Paul Washer and John Piper. Because of the style of preaching that they had, I'm like, well, I can go to churches like this. When you come from a charismatic church and your preacher has to have a sweat rag and some water because he gonna give it to you, and then you leave from that to a lecture, that's real hard.
Yeah, you get whiplash.
Oh my goodness,
theological whiplash.
Yeah, I mean, and you're like,
liturgical whiplash.
Liturgical, yeah. It's like, well, that was a good lecture. Praise God. I guess I'm gonna have to listen to that. But there's sometimes like I miss the kind of preaching where I'm gonna tell you, Toby's done this to me. Toby's done a good job of this, I think, in trying to balance those two. But I miss the kind of preaching where even in the charismatic church, the preacher would have you almost in tears before the sermon is over and you on your knees crying out to God. I miss that kind of stuff where your whole soul is shaking and you're like, look, I ain't got time for him to finish before I'm out here face down on the floor asking God to forgive me or sanctify me or fill me with, I miss that kind of preaching that stirs the soul. And some of it was thin, but me and my wife thought, man, by the time we came over to the more reform side, that kind of preaching, we wouldn't be able to get up off the floor at any given Sunday. There's no way. We got all the word of God and we got all this catechism. We got all this confession and all this theology, but we going to be on the floor every Sunday. And we walked into church, it was like, these people are dead. What's wrong with y'all, man? You got all this theology and no life, like it was anyway. But I think that's part of it is a craft. Like there is some of that was missing from the reform world. I think, hopefully, I've been out in Northwest. I've found a lot more of those two things trying to live together. They're not afraid of each other out here, and I appreciate that. So you have to.
It's the Northwest is. I remember when people started talking about social distancing, and I was like, wait, that's just called normal life in the Northwest, right? Like stay 6 feet apart. It's like, why would you want to be any closer than that? But so there is, there are habits that I think come from the Oregon Trail, that kind of exist out here. But I mean, the one of the things that I appreciate about kind of the masculinity up here is you're much more likely, amongst the Christian men up here in the Northwest to have men that are comfortable with their emotions, express their love and care for one another, and than in any of then maybe some of the places where you've have the tradition of kind of that faux masculinity with that, where emotions aren't a part of it. You don't have that so much out here in the West Coast.
Really? I don't know. I might have to think about that one.
Well, I guess you're in Idaho, right? I'm not in
So,
Idaho.
yeah.
Idaho's got it.
I've seen a lot more of that. All right, so what's the poem for next time? Are we doing Dante? Because I think.
Well, let's do a little bit of Gerard Manley Hopkins next time.
Gerard Manley Hopkins?
Gerard Manley Hopkins. We'll do some poetry that's some explicitly Christian poetry rather than something from a non-Christian. What does it look like for a Christian to try and rejoice in the world that God has made?
What's the title of the poem?
Well, we'll do one that's just called Spring, and one that's called As Kingfishers Catch Fire.
We'll do both of those next time.
Yeah, we'll do both of those next time because they're both shorter, sonnet length.
Spring and As what catch fire?
As Kingfishers Catch Fire. It's a kind of bird.
Kingfishers. Okay. All right. Now, you know what's weird about this? This is really a weird connection, but the whole point that we're doing this is to go back and deal with all of our issues that we've been dealing with for a long, long time with Knox Unplugged. Like, this is re-anchoring us to deal with the social justice stuff, to deal with our Gnosticism, to deal with Christian humanism, to deal with all these things. And It just seems so odd that we would be using poetry to connect poetry to all the conversations that we've been having. Because I think I don't do this for anybody else but for me. So I'm sorry, whoever else listens to this, I'm just going to tell you, this is the most selfish show that exists in podcast world ever. I don't care if people tune out because this is just for me, but this is the part of it is just really building us up so that we can deal with these other issues really, 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 really well. So sometimes we do history lessons to deal with some of these conversations, but part of it is saying all this stuff, Gnosticism, social justice, critical theory, what's some of the other things we deal with, Jason? Metaphysics,
metaphysics, cosmology. I'm thinking of Christian nationalism. All this stuff is our inability to really be poetic beings, right? Like that's the kind of thing that we're missing. And that's the antidote that we need to be able to deal with this. I'll say this and then we can go. But if we need to be the kind of men that know how to get up and speak in a way that moves people's hearts to follow, to chase after what's beautiful, to commit to their families in such a way that that they're not, and enjoying. I'm gonna tell you something that's, since we've been doing this, Jason, family worship at my house has been on point. And it's not because I'm like trying to work really hard to do it. I can't wait to do it. And I'm finding the time to do it. I'm finding 15 minutes here, 13 minutes there. I found something else I can't wait to bring to the family with this poet. Let's talk about this. Let's work through this. And then all the other things come in, and working through the confession. And I mean, talk about a lovely piece of literature. I mean, the Westminster Confession of Faith, the larger catechism, and understanding the way that they were educated and how they think about God's law from working through the scriptures. Man, the way they break down the first commandment and what's forbidden in the first commandment and what's required in the first commandment, those two things, you start saying, whoa, I've never even thought like this before. I mean, that's a poetic form of literature that you have to work through. It's like, well, this is all scripture. I've never, anyway. So anyway, I know. I think it's the difference between being on offense and being on offense.
Yes, that's exactly right. But it doesn't feel like no one right now, if you stood up and said, you know what, the way we're going to take over the world is through poetry, everybody look and be like, nah, I'm going to go write a book on critical theory and Christian nationalism.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do.
There's probably more money in it. Right. I don't get my poetry published for the money in it. But that's what the left has done. They're at least practicing at it, exercising. Yeah. But we're always living in response, right? So what's the next big book? Well, it's going to be the one that answers whatever the move the left made. Right. We're always living in response, and just refusing and saying, no, we don't live in response anymore. We're building.
Mm.
We've got stuff to build.
Mm.
I don't have time to live in response to anyone because the world's going to be living in response to me soon.
So right? We were talking about this. Christopher Watkin wrote a book. This is talking about living in response to something. Biblical Critical Theory. Forward by Tim Keller. That's it. We're just biblical critical theory. Why not?
Yeah. Right. And I haven't read the book, so I don't even know what it's about, but you sent me the cover.
Here's what it's about.
And I was like,
I mean, you can't see it on my phone, but I mean, it's just, and then how the Bible unfolding story makes sense of modern life and culture. Just, I don't know what he's going to say, but I don't even, it's like, I'm not, yeah. I'm want to find something else that's not in response. How really, and it's really,
right.
When you go back, especially like Doug's early stuff, Doug's been doing this for years, but he's got federal husband, federal, reforming marriage. He's got all these things that are so foundational to the I mean, he's been doing this for years, and some of it's just now being seen. Let's talk about like being forward thinking. Everybody now is jumping on the bandwagon of masculinity, and he's had Future Men out for years. He's got conferences going back for 30 years, right. And it's like that was advancing before it was cool, and now people are just now starting to say, "Well, what's a good book on manhood?" Really? I mean, I'm glad you're going there. I'm glad you're going there, but all right.
Well, but I think that's because he studied classics and poetry, and so he was able to see. He was able to see what did it look like to build and not just in response. Not just build walls to keep people out, but build where it's defending. And I think that's what we. I think that's the mode we need to get into, right? I think it is inevitable that we are going to be pushed to the back of the bus as Christians, that we're not going to, and there'll be places where, like, I think Moscow is probably not going to happen as much as, someplace like LA or someplace, but our job is, wherever God puts us, to say, okay, well, here is the ground that we will garden. If it is the back of the cultural bus, then let's garden it, and then start throwing garden parties, and watch as the bus flips around and the back becomes the front again, because that's the way it's always worked historically. Is the faithful Christians haven't forced their way to the front and then insisted on driving. Faithful Christians have made whatever it is that God has given them, they've taken good care of it, and then the world came and said, wow, that's working well. How are you doing that? And you say, well, let us show you, right? And I think we long too much for the driver's seat, and don't take care of our own business, don't take care of our own plot of land because we want the throne. And I think we got to just say, look what I got. Let's make this amazing.
That's it, man. That's good stuff.